everyone, my name is Jenna, but you guys can call me Jen, and welcome back to my channel. Welcome to my September wrap-up. Today's wrap-up is probably going to be a little bit shorter than usual because September was, unfortunately, my worst reading month of the year. I read 8 books this month, which is still great, and in terms of what I read, absolutely phenomenal. We had 3 5 stars, my guys. Okay, we're just gonna break down the stats and get into this video. In September, as I said, read 8 books. Wonderful, wonderful. I read 5 adult fantasy and 3 adult sci-fi. So, you know, keeping it in my core genres, keeping it tight. Out of those, 1 2.5 star, 2 4 stars, 2 4.5 stars, and 3 5 stars, which I am so pleased with. So, first up, we're just gonna get into it. We're gonna get into it. This month, I originally had planned to read a lot more because it was my birthday month. I like to kind of give myself more time to read really just like what I want to read and not be beholden to videos or TBRs that I've got laid out, you know. But of course, because I'm a content creator, that does kind of get in the way sometimes. And I think life got in the way this month for sure. First up, I reread A Psalm for the Wild Bill by Becky Chambers for the purpose of reading Prayer, which I also did read. And this was just absolutely phenomenal on reread. I loved this book the first time around. I adored it the second time around. And it was just perfection and exactly what I needed. There's something so wonderfully beautiful about Becky Chambers and what she does in her work. And I'm so excited for whatever else she releases because every single one of her books that she's released, I've really enjoyed, and these are no exception. Favorite books of all time, absolutely exceptional. This one was actually my favorite book of the year last year, so there is that as well. But yes, I gave this 5 stars, and we'll just talk about Prayer as well. And then I read Prayer for the Crown Shy as well. I read them like within 2 days of each other, and I absolutely adored this. I see a lot of people talking that this has the second book syndrome, and I think it does. It's very sequel-y, and a lot of people are saying that this was incredibly rushed and the ending didn't feel right. Upon reading, yes, I can see that for sure, but in my opinion, the final image of this book was perfect for the story that was told overall. It wasn't necessarily the plot's final image, and I think that's what makes people like feel like it's too rushed, but it did wrap up like the overarching story very well. Both of these follow Dex, who is a tea monk, and at the beginning of Psalm, they feel like their life is kind of stagnant and they need to change it up. And there's a couple times where they keep falling into this rut and they feel that. On this latest time, after they kind of go on this tea monk adventure and become a tea monk and like drive around their little utopian world and serve tea to people, they fall into this rut again where they feel like they need a change. And so Dex kind of gets this idea in their head that they want to go and just leave civilization and go into the wilderness and go on this like pilgrimage up to this old abandoned factory. In this, they end up meeting a robot, and in this world, robots long ago ended up, you know, leaving humanity and going to live in the wilderness. So Dex meets Mosscap, and then they have this wonderful discussion about humanity and what it means to be human and what it means to have purpose and passion and what it means to feel like you're just unmoored and you have no idea what's going on in your life. And this is just perfection in a book. This is a continuation of that, although this one is more with Dex helping Mosscap kind of with these issues as well, and it was just beautiful. The Psalm feels like a autumn day with a cup of tea in hand, and Prayer feels like a late summer night on the beach with your friends. Like these feel so wonderful and are so beautiful, and I cannot wait for the next one in this series. It's just gonna be phenomenal. All right, I then reread, I'm in my rereading era, The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Shuri, and this was a phenomenal reread. Oh man, and this was actually a weirdly interesting reread. I gave it 5 stars automatically because in my head it is 5 stars. It's one of my favorites of all time, but like objectively, it's more of a 4.5 star. So it lost half a star upon rereading, which is fine. That happens a lot. A lot of the books that I reread recently have like gained stars, so it's fine. But this is perfection in a book. I love it so much. It was Copile that told me it was 4.5 stars and not 5 stars. So this is just fantastic. If you don't know what this is about Malini, who is a trapped princess whose brother is emperor and who has trapped her for his own religious reasons and basically tortures her and keeps her under lock and key with this helper woman. And she ends up up being put into an ancient temple in this world that Priya is a child of that temple. And there's like some really interesting backstory with the temple itself, and it's their story at the heart of this book, but it also has a lot of other POVs surrounding it. So we have like Bhumika, who is another temple child like Priya, who is in a political savvy position as the wife to like a head of state essentially. And it follows a couple rebellious people coming from other kingdoms, and it's this brewing unease of a rebellion to take back their city, you know? Surrounded by this beautiful, just deeply wonderful and painful sapphic relationship between Malini and Priya. And this book is one of my favorites of all time. I reread this specifically so that I could dive into the Oleander Sword, which I did later in the month. And this is one of my favorite books of the year. It is phenomenal. It gets a full 5 stars for me without question. This book tore me apart. There's something to say about Tasha Suri's writing, and that is she excels when it comes to relationships between people and building those relationships and the characters at the center of them really, really, really well. How they interplay with the world building around them and each other. It is just exceptional what she does, and oh my god, I have a vlog where I read this, if you guys did not see it, and I sobbed throughout the latter half of this book because it was just so good. And then Tasha Suri did that. She went there, and this sequel is one of the best sequels I have ever read. Phenomenal. Loved these so much. Really, this reading month was just fantastic. I also ended up reading The Bone Orchard by Sarah A. Mueller this month. I picked that up from my library, and it was so interesting. I gave it 4 stars, and it was just, I don't even know what to say about it. It's got such interesting elements to it. I was confused by a lot of what I read, but I overall really enjoyed the aspect of our main character Charm and her bone ghosts that she's created, which are essentially different pieces of her personality removed from her and reflected in a physical body of a bone creature. And her and these girls run a brothel together. Charm has a like alternate personality where they call her the lady, and the lady at the beginning of this can't really know, or is kept really separate from everything that Charm does and all of the absolute horrors that the bone ghosts go through their, you know, work in the brothel. It's such an interesting choice for main characters and points of view in this story, because really what the story is about Charm and her internal battle with all these different parts of herself, and it's about pride, and it's about them working together. It's set as a like murder mystery almost, like not quite, I wouldn't quite pitch it as a murder mystery, but at the beginning of this, Charm is tasked by the emperor of the city, whom she is a mistress of, to find out who murdered him, because he's dying very, very suddenly. And so she's like, all right, and he's like, I also task you to pick someone who's better than any of my sons and put them on the throne, because if any of my sons get on the throne, it's gonna be awful. So she kind of, you know, takes this to heart, and there's this weird technology in this world as well that like mind controls a lot of these people, because the magic is really interesting. That was probably the part that I was most confused about, was the magic system and like the mind control bits of the story. But otherwise it was very good. Super bloody dark. Let me tell you, trigger warnings everywhere, all of them. Please look them up if you're at all interested in this story, because it was a lot to read. I have a really high tolerance for that kind of stuff, so it didn't really bother me that much, but it was very dark, and it has, you know, murder in it at the hands of men sexually assaulting women, and it's all that kind of a vibe. So it's a lot, but it was also very, very, very good and very well written. It was very insular as well, because it's set mostly just inside Orchard House, which is the name of the brothel. Yeah, it was very interesting, and I don't know why it's only a 4-star for me, but it wasn't perfect, and it wasn't quite a new favorite, but it was definitely very good. The next book that I read this month was The Book Eaters by Sunyi Dean. This was also a 4-star book for me, and my 100th book of the year, which is very exciting. I have an entire vlog dedicated to this, so you can definitely go watch that if you want all my thoughts on this. I really enjoyed it. This feels like a, you know, one of those typical women-led thrillers where a woman's running for her life the entire time kind of a vibe, mixed with fairy tales that have been turned on their head. So it follows Devon, who has run away from her patriarchal society as a book eater to protect her son, who is a mind eater. It's them trying to get a hold of this drug that will help him basically live a life that he can live, from this family who is also a book eater family that has since lost contact with all the other book eaters in a very dramatic way. And it's, I don't know, it starts off with the vibes of a serial killer and a serial killer's apprentice. It's wild, truly, truly wild. I really liked it. And I think I read it in like one day. It's fast, it's snappy, it's got so much going on, and it took me a while to really know whether I really liked this or not, or if it was just like I was reading it because it's one of those things where I can't look away from it because it's so wild. I just can't look away, one of those things. But yeah, I did really enjoy this. Then I read The Color of Magic by Terry Pratchett. This was my friend's book club pick for the month, and I just don't vibe with Pratchett's books. The only one that I did vibe with was Good Omens, and that's because it's co-written by Neil Gaiman, and I don't know, Neil Gaiman like took out all the Pratchett that I hate. So I didn't like The Color of Magic. It's the first Discworld book. I really couldn't even tell you what it's about. I just remember that it's split into like 4 stories following the same character and like a delineation of that. My friends really liked it. I just didn't. I didn't find anything to really like in it. It was hard to keep track of and to pay attention to. I felt like I had to use like 200% of my brain power to even pay attention to what was going on. It just didn't work for me, and I gave it like 2.5 stars. And then the very last book of the month, yeah, we're already at the end, that I read was Gideon the Ninth, which is a reread of mine because I am currently rereading through Gideon and Harrow. I actually just finished Harrow. It's a first read of October for the purpose of reading Nona the Ninth. And I am so glad that I decided to reread these because these books are made for rereading. Gideon is a favorite book of all time for me, and this reread cemented that for me. This is one of the ones where original rating I think was 4.5 stars, and this has bumped it completely up to a 5. I love that for me, and I love that for my girl Gideon. She's just my favorite literary character ever. The narration style of Tamsin Muir's books is so delicious and intriguing, and going back through having read both Gideon and Harrow and then rereading Gideon and Harrow to go forward into Nona has allowed me to realize what actually was going on in these books. So this one is best pitched as And Then There Were None, with memes and lesbians in space. So it follows Gideon, who is a orphan, part of the 9th house. In this world, there are 9 planets who all follow under one emperor god. His name is also John, which is kind of fun. In this, Harrow Hark, who is the 9th house leader, essentially the daughter of the leaders of the 9th house and a necromancer, asks Gideon, or basically makes Gideon, be her cavalier or her second in this competition thing, sort of thing, where they all go to the 1st house and become lictors for the Emperor Undying. They have to essentially do this by going through all these different challenges and figuring it out on their own and deciding at the end to be a lictor. And while they're there, people start dying and they don't know why. So it's this super intriguing exploration of a like gothic, decrepit palace that hasn't been lived in eons, and it's these necromancers and their cavaliers not really getting along but having to get along in different instances and figuring out these puzzles, and it's Gideon and her wit and her just himbo protectiveness. I love it so much. I'm so glad that I reread these 2 books. I'll talk about Harrow in my October wrap up because the puzzle pieces that Tamsin Muir has been putting down in both of these books. Reading this, I was reading it, and the first time I read it, so confused. Second time, I was like, wow, I understand everything that's going on. This is making me so happy. That was everything I read in the month of September. Please let me know down below what your favorite book of the month was. I would love to know. My favorite book was definitely The Oleander Sword, but this month overall has been absolutely exceptional for reading. The only loss was Color of Magic, and I don't even consider that a loss because it was like a 4-hour situation on a Friday evening that I can just throw away. Everything else was perfect. Everything else was wonderful. Anyways, my friends, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I will catch you in another video very, very soon. Stay kind and keep on reading.